Hello and welcome to the Wild Protea. Thanks for joining me once again, guys. My name obviously is Clinton Jarman. Thanks for joining me. Before I get into things, don't forget to like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also hit that notification button to get all the latest from the Wild Protea. Also get commenting, guys. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of the show? What do you think of what I'm trying to do here, creating a fan channel and that sort of thing. Straight into things then. Like I said, during lockdown it's quite difficult to get content because there's no new sport being played except for football, but not in South Africa. So yeah, so what I've seen on Twitter is guys putting up their best sort of 15s and 11s of post readmission in the Protea setup, and also obviously the Springboks setup. So I thought I'd give my own post readmission teams and see what you guys think. So I'm going to start off with the cricket to the Proteas. So my post readmission team would be first and foremost Graeme Smith. Now, as a captain, I don't think you could get any better than Graeme Smith. I think he was our best captain ever in a Protea shirt. And going with that, he's the best, probably one of the best openers as well. You know, he's got the stats to prove it. His captaincy record is pretty good. And I just think he was a good leader of men. Nothing typifies the man more than when he broke his hand against Mitchell Johnson in Australia, came out to bat, tried to save the test match, didn't end up saving the test match, but it says a lot for the man's character. You know, and like he said in a few sort of documentary things, the guys helped him pad up. He didn't have his own kit there and that sort of thing. And I think that speaks volumes for the type of leader that he was, that everyone was willing to help him in that situation to get out there and try and save the test match. Number two for me, opening partnership with him. For me, Herschel Gibbs. I just think they complement each other really well. Herschel Gibbs was obviously a more aggressive type opener than Graeme. Although Graeme could dominate an attack, but Graeme dominated an attack in a different sort of way, where he stood big, tall. He's a big guy. Stood in front of his stumps and said, you know, you're going to bowl to me now. Sort of walking down the wicket at guys as well. Not to try and smash them, but to put them off their game. You know, he's a big lad. And then Herschel Gibbs was the aggressor, you know, and he played that role. So I think those two complement each other beautifully, and that's why I've got them at the top of the order. Then, you know, for me, number 3, 4 and 5 just speak for themselves. Now, I've got Hashim Amla at 3, Jacques Kallis at 4, and AB de Villiers at 5. Now, I don't think there's going to be any argument here. Those are probably the 3 best batsmen that South Africa has ever produced. In Hashim Amla, over 10,000 runs in Test cricket, you know, an absolute stalwart over the last, for the last sort of 10 years or so. And then, you know, you've got Jacques Kallis, arguably the greatest all-rounder of all time. You know, others might say other things. You know, I've seen Ben Stokes in the discussion recently, and I just think that's so outlandish to say that, you know, Jacques Kallis was a performer, a consistent performer for a long period of time. I know he struggled a bit in his first couple of test matches, but I mean, after that, the man was absolutely brilliant. You know, there's no doubt Ben Stokes can win you a game and change a game, but he hasn't done it consistently over a long period of time like Jacques Kallis did. And I think that's something that we get caught up in with this era of sport. Everything seems to happen instantly, and when someone can instantly change a game, you immediately put their name sort of ahead of you know, guys that did it for a longer period. So for me, Jacques Kallis, best all-rounder of all time, so he's a no-brainer being in the side. And then AB de Villiers is probably the most talented batsman I've ever seen. You know, Mr. 360, he's got it all. He can block out to save a game, block out 200 and odd deliveries or whatever it was, scoring only, I think, 14 or 15 runs or whatever the thing was. He could do that. And then he also showed you what he can do obviously in the white ball format, but he can do it in the test match format as well. He comes out and blasts 100 as well. So he can have either gear and he can change the game that way. Then at 6 for me, I've got Quinton de Kock. Now it's a bit of a tough one here, because obviously you've got Boucher, who was in the side for a very, very long time, and Quinton is obviously the guy who came in to replace him, more or less. But I just think Quinton's game-changing ability is far greater than Mark Boucher's. Now, Mark Boucher used to bat to the tail and bat very well with the tail and scored some important runs for South Africa, batting with the last batsman or batting with the tail. But I just think Quinton has the unique ability to change the game in a much faster fashion. And even if you are behind the 8 ball, he can score runs in a way that gives you momentum and gives the guys confidence. So when the bowlers step out on the field, no matter how many runs you've scored, if those runs have come fairly quickly, the bowlers step out there with a bit of confidence, saying, you know what, Quinny's actually given us something to bowl at here, and fuels the guys in that way, if I can say that. Then for me, I have not picked an all-rounder. Obviously, I've got Jacques Kallis in as my all-rounder, so that affords me now either I can pick another batsman at 7, or I can go with 5 bowlers. So I've gone the 5 bowler route, and I'm only going to ask Jacques to bowl when I absolutely need him. But I don't. With my bowling attack, I don't think you're going to need Jacques at all. So I've gone Vern at 7. Vern's, I think, Vern came in and pretty much dominated world cricket for a period. Although it was a short period because he only came in late in his career, but I think Vern's good enough to make this team. There are other guys you could throw in, the Sean Pollocks, the Alan Donalds, a few others names you could throw around, Morne Morkel, but I just think Vern, his ability to take away the best batsman in the opposing team's lineup was second to none. And then for me, I've gone for Keshav Maharaj as my spinner. If you've watched me before, you will know that I have criticised Kesh in the past. However, during this lockdown, it's given me time to sort of look up on guys and check. And I think Keshav has been done a little bit of a disservice by his batsmen not always getting enough runs for him to play with. And I think Keshav also can play 2 roles. He can be an attacking spinner when the conditions suit him, and he can also defend when the conditions don't suit him. He's not always great at that defensive job, but he can do it. He has done it in the past. I just think sometimes he bowls a little bit too slowly in those conditions where he needs to bowl a little bit quicker in conditions that don't suit him or when it's not turning, and try and control the game instead of taking wickets. Then for me at 9, I've gone with Dale Steyn, an absolute no-brainer. For me, the greatest fast bowler I've ever seen. It's just a pity that he got so many injuries, because I think that if he didn't get injured, he would have set the wickets tally for seamers at a just insurmountable height. Jimmy Anderson obviously has that record now, but I think Dale would have gone far beyond that, because Dale's just a better bowler for me, in my opinion. Like I said, I think he's the greatest fast bowler of all time. So that's obviously a no-brainer then if you think that. And then at 9, I've gone for KG Rabada. Now, I know KG is a bit young in his career to be put in a sort of all-time best 11, but I just think that, at the current rate at which he's taking wickets, he probably will overtake Dale Steyn and probably will overtake Jimmy Anderson as well. Now, obviously he's had a few back issues and whatever with injury, but I just think that if he can stay fit and stay healthy, he's got a good 10 years, 12 years left in him. And obviously he won't always take wickets at this clip. I think his average is around 22, 23 right now. But if he can sustain a sort of 25 average for the next 10 years, he will definitely surpass Jimmy Anderson. And he also might go down as one of the best fast bowlers of all time if he can continue to perform. And I think he will. He's shown that he's a consistent performer, and he's shown that he's a world-class player. You don't often get those kind of players letting it slip. And then last but not least, I've gone for Makaya Ntini. I've gone for Makaya because he was an absolute stalwart for South Africa. He bowled in some amazing opening partnerships, and I just think that he's a very underrated very underrated cricketer, and I don't see why. I thought he was phenomenal for the Proteas. Like I said, there are other names you could throw in there as bowlers, but for me, Makhaya Ntini, just also as an inspiration to young black cricketers everywhere. He was sort of the guy, you know. I've heard stories of, you know, Makhaya not bowling well on a day one, on a certain day one, and then going out the next before day two and running a 5k or a 10k to get his head right, and then he came back and took 5 or 6 or whatever. Obviously he's got his name on the honours board at Lords, so you know, I think Makhaya Ntini deserves to be in the team. Then I must just mention a few other guys that didn't make the cut. You know, Paul Adams, Ashwell Prince, Alan Donald, Faf du Plessis, Alvira Peterson, Paul Harris, JP Duminy. I mean, the list goes on. But I just think with all of those guys, look, it's tough to get. I mean, I suppose you could probably bring in Faf or maybe KG. Maybe KG's a bit young and have a 7th batsman. Or you could swap sort of Alvira Peterson with Herschel Gibbs. You could bring in Gary Kirsten for Herschel Gibbs as well. You could swap Alan Donald with any one of the bowlers, or Sean Pollock with any one of the bowlers. But this, I think my 11 is just better. I think these guys are just better than those guys. You know, JP Duminy as well. JP Duminy was world class on his day. Unfortunately, that day wasn't consistent enough for me. Yeah, I just think Japes, you know, he came onto the scene, was really talented, and then didn't really fulfill his potential. So for me, that's my readmission 11. I think that's close to the best 11 that you could get. Obviously, I've gone for a 6-5 split. You know, I've got Jacques Callis in there as well, and that's sort of a 6th bowler as well. So I've got all the bases covered in terms of in the bowling department. Maybe a bit light in the batting department, but I'm hoping for runs from Vern, and I'm hoping for runs from Keshev. You know, I don't think that there's many times that Graham Smith, Herschel Gibbs, Hashim Amla, Jacques Callis, Abe de Villiers and Quinton de Kock are going to fail on a given day. So I think I've got my bases covered. And that is my readmission 11. So moving on to the rugby side of things. Now this is kind of a readmission 11, but more 2007 onwards 15 for me, because I just think that from 2007 till 2019, I think that's our best period of rugby that we've played. Obviously, I'm too young to remember guys sort of 95-ish and that, but for me, this is the best Springbok 11 that I could come up with. You guys might think differently. Again, get your comments in. I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think of my team, and maybe post a team of your own. So for me, at number 1, I've gone for Tendai the Beast in Tawarira. Now, for me, he was an absolute stalwart. He came in after the 2007 World Cup and just never left. He was absolutely brilliant. The strength of the man, his scrumming ability, hitting rucks, carrying the ball up. I think he was brilliant. At hooker, I've gone for Bismarck du Plessis. Now, this was a bit of a tough one because there are a few names that you could throw in here. You know, I've seen guys throwing in Malcolm Marx. I think Bongi Manami is better than Malcolm Marx. I don't know why that is, why Marx is in there. Maybe because Marx has that running ability and offloading ability. But as a pure hooker, I think Bongi is better. And then obviously the World Cup winning captain in John Smith. Now, John Smith was a great captain and a great player, but I just think Bismarck du Plessis epitomizes everything you want and need in a hooker. He's a great scrummager. He carries the ball well, hits rucks, effects steals. I just think he was the best hooker that we've ever had. Then at 3, I've got his brother, Yanni. Now, Yanni wasn't the flash sort of props that we have now that carry the ball up and this sort of thing. He'd do the occasional carry, but mainly he would hit rucks and he would scrum really, really well. And I just think from a consistency point of view, he was consistently in the team as well and consistently, you know, doing his job which was the good doctor doing his job, which was scrumming and hitting rucks. And I just think he's, from a consistency point of view, that's why he's gotten into my team. And then you get into the rest. I've got, at 4, I've got Victor Matfield, arguably one of the greatest locks of all time, definitely in terms of South African locks. And then at 5, I've gone for Eben Etzebeth. Now this might be a little bit of a contentious one, obviously, because you might Victor and Bakkies Botha were probably one of the most feared lock combinations in the world, in their prime, and a large part of why we won that 2007 World Cup. So, but for me, Eben Etzebeth it speaks for itself, really. Mountain of a man, huge carries, obviously affects line-out steals. Like Victor was pro at that as well. So I think with those two in your team, you can't go wrong. And then number 6, I've got Sia the Bear Kolisi. For me, one of the best captains we've ever had. One of the best number 6s we've ever had as well. We've had a few good ones. I mean, you could put Skalkberger in there. And the list, I could name a lot of names now, but the list would continue for days. But I just think Sia, when you combine his ability with his captaining ability, I just think he's the right man for the job, the right man to captain the team as well. So he'd be my captain. So that's number 6 there. Number 7, the other flanker, I'd go for Peter Steph du Toit. The reason is obvious. He's World Player of the Year, absolutely outstanding. His work rate, he gets through tackles like nobody's business, and at the end of the game, he's still doing whatever he needs to do for the team, and just never seems to run out of energy. Does his job, goes above and beyond his job. I think he's probably the best flanker, although he's been converted lock. I think that was an absolute masterstroke from Rassie Erasmus to convert him to a flanker. And that's my number 7. Then at number 8 is quite interesting because there are a few guys in the running, but I think Dwayne Vermeulen's probably the best 8th man we've ever produced, and I've got Dwayne in at 8. Then at 9, I've got Fourie du Preez. For me, best scrum half we've ever had. Again, there are other good names you could mention. Some people might think Ruan Pienaar. I don't. I think Enrico January needs a special mention here. I think he was pretty good. And there are a few other names, but I just think Fourie du Preez for me, obviously Faf de Klerk, but I just think Fourie du Preez for me, his reading of the game was exceptional. Even in his latter years, he was still an exceptional performer, and I think the best scrum half we've ever produced. And then at 10 is an interesting one because you've got obviously Butch James from the 2007 era, and then just after that you've got Morne Steyn. You've got a few guys who came and went, Pat Lambie, Jan Goosen. But for me, Andre Pollard is the best. Andre Pollard for me is a combination of Morne and Butch James. He's got the sleight of hand, the stepping ability of Butch James, and then he's got a similar kicking ability to Morne, not quite as accurate and not quite as good with the tactical kicking side of things, but I think he's got enough of both to be the better player. And for me, that's why I've gone for Andre Pollard. Then number 11, again, another absolute no-brainer. Brian Habana is the best winger that's ever played rugby, in my opinion. You've got some serious arguments from across the pond in Australia and also obviously New Zealand, but I just think he was the complete player. He can tackle. He's obviously in his prime was really, really quick. He's got that little chip and chase move. He can kick the ball really well out of hand, and also as a winger he goes looking for work, which not many wingers do. Then at 12 I've got Jean de Villiers here. Now again, obviously there's other guys you might think of, but I think Jean de Villiers in his prime was probably the best centre that we've produced. It's a pity he was so injury prone, otherwise I think it would be a no-brainer as well. But for me, Jean de Villiers at 12. Then partnering him in the midfield, I would have Lukhanyo Am. Now Lukhanyo Am for me has come on leaps and bounds in the last couple of years, and I just think he's a quality performer, and I think defensively he's solid. And then on attack, he's got the pace of a winger at 13. So you've basically got an extra winger, and the man's got an eye for a gap, great hands. Yeah, for me, Lukhanyo Am gets into my team. 14, this was a tough one. Obviously, you've got Cheslin Colby, did really, really well. Apiwe Dianti is a bit young. There are a lot of names when it comes to wingers, particularly, but I've gone for JP Peterson. I think him and Brian were a great combination. And then at 15, I've gone for Percy Montgomery. And that's my sort of 2007 to 2019 team that I've chosen. Now, there has to be obviously honourable mentions. Like I said, John Smith, Paki Spoorte, Osturant needs an honourable mention. Danny Rousseau, Jacques Fourie as well. Jacques Fourie and Jean de Villiers could have been the best centre combination in the world at that time. It's just a pity that it never really worked out for either of them in terms of injuries. And then you've got obviously Butch James, Pat Lambie, Cheslin Colby, Francis Steyn, Francois Lowe, Mornay Steyn, Ruan Pienaar. The list can go on forever. You know, you got Scout Brits, Scout Berger. Yeah, like I said, the list can go on and on and on. But these are the guys that I've chosen. I think that's a pretty darn good team, if you ask me. I think all of them are World Cup winners, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they're all World Cup winners, so you can't go wrong with that. But yeah, guys, like I was saying, get your comments in below. What do you think of my team? Make your own teams, and we can discuss and have a conversation. Yeah, so that is pretty much what I have for you this week. Now, pretty excited about this. As you guys know, from the 1st of June, lockdown restrictions will be eased somewhat, moving down to level 3. And as such, I've invited a friend of mine who plays club cricket for a local club called Claremont Cricket Club. He's the captain. His name is Mark Hendricks. He'll be joining me next week for a kind of interview, but more of a chat about sort of club cricket, his club, and also just sort of cricket in general. So don't miss that. And thanks for joining me once again, guys. I will see you again next week with that little chat from Mark. Otherwise, guys, stay safe out there. Don't forget to wash your hands. You know, be safe, you know, with your family and stuff like that. And don't go out unless you absolutely need to. Have a great weekend, guys, and I will see you next week. Cheers.